All right, so this is a typical program. So I'm going to save this. Then I'm going to delete a bunch of stuff. So I'm going to delete all of this stuff here. And then we're going to recreate it. So let me delete all this stuff here. Now what I've done is in Canvas, I've posted a starting template for you, which has everything but this in here. So let's go over this template right now. And if you want to do comments and you want to break them up in multiple lines, you're going to hit the slash key and then a star, and notice that it will do the second comment for you automatically. And then you can put in whatever you want to put, your comments here. So you can see what I've done up top here. So every program that you submit to me should have your name as the very first thing. Then the assignment, which I spelled wrong, so let me fix this. So I'm going to put example page 124, number 5. A little bit of description of the program. This program is going to get input from 3 numbers and add them together, get the average. And we're actually going to do that first right now. And then we're going to do a radius program. And this is a little bit similar to what we did last week. So all the things here you do not need. Right now, the only 2 things you really need is Iostream and namespace. But it's always good to have these. So I'll explain each one right now again, just to refresh you. Iostream is your input-output. Without them, you can't get input, you can't get output, and there's a bunch of other things that goes along with it. String, you use not to be able to use a string variable. You actually use it to be able to manipulate strings and get the string length and get a substring and a bunch of that. So that won't come till later on. IOmanip is going to allow you to do formatting of text in here to do decimal places and things of that. And we're going to discuss C-type later on. Now notice this has got C-type.h. And that lets you do some other things that we're going to need later on. But for right now, we don't need to worry about it in here. And then we may do math and some other things. But for right now, we're just going to stick with these. So if you go into Canvas, the wonderful world of Canvas, wherever that is, actually we'll go over that later on right now. So I'm going to go back in and start going through these things in here. So these are the rules that you need to think about. You need to declare all of your variables first in here. The very first thing. Now, yes, you can do a lot of things that I'm not requiring. You can do them different ways. However, I want you guys to do things a certain way so you learn good habits. And then when you on your own, you're welcome to do whatever you want. That's fine. So we have all variables have to be 1 per line. All variables must be initialized. You need to use proper naming, which I'll go over. That's Camel Case for regular variables. That means that the first word is a lowercase and it cannot start with an underscore. Although C++ will allow you to, I want you to start just with a lowercase letter. So and the second word begins with a capital letter. And I've given an example, last name. Notice that last is there, and the only letter that's capitalized is the N. Constants, on the other hand, are all uppercase, and if you have more than one word, you separate them with an underscore. So for right now, those are the only 2 things we need to be concerned with, is Camel Case, which is the first word is lowercase, and every word after that is capitalized, and then constants, where everything is capitalized. Now, the reason why it's capitalized is so you know it's a constant and you can't change it. So I will show you again what will happen if you try to do it. So here's how you declare variables. The variable type first. So you can look in the book and get the different variables. But for now, we're going to be working primarily with integers, with strings, with floats and doubles. You can use, if you're going to use a float, use float all the way around. If you're going to use a double, use a double all the way around. For what we're going to be doing, float will be just fine. You don't have to worry about using double. If you want to use double, that's okay. You may get a compiler warning that says you may lose data, but that's only for very, very, very large numbers. And here's how you declare a constant. So the word const first, the data type here, and then all capital letters and 3.14. So that's how we do that. So let's just say that we were going to create an integer constant. So you would just type the word const first, then int, and then we'll use max numbers. And you must initialize it to whatever you want to initialize it. So I'm going to initialize it to 0. So let's start off on the wrong foot and just say that I want to realize, oh my goodness, I did something wrong. I changed max numbers. I really wanted it to be 2. So I said, okay, no problem. So I got a bunch of code here. So then I just go max numbers. Oops. Notice that as soon as I start typing, it fills in for me. And then I can just go here and select it with however I want to do it. Hit the tab key. Don't hit the enter key. Hit the tab key and it fills it in. So if you guys are familiar with Cisco, you can hit the tab key to fill in commands. So now I'm going to try to change it to 2. So this is our only line of code. And we got this red squiggly thing in here, and it's telling me must be a modifiable variable in here. So that means if I try to compile it, I'm going to get an error. So let's go and try to compile it because I don't believe it. Now, the reason why I'm bringing you this right now is because we're using Visual Studio 19, and that's going to give you all kinds of instruments that other ones are not going to, like Eclipse and some other ones, and you might not get a compile error. You might be using Visual Studio 17 or something else, and it might not give you this. So we need to make sure that you understand it. So let me click on compile, and I should get an error. How exciting is that? And let's see what happens. And it gives me an error. It says you cannot assign to a variable that is a constant. So that doesn't work. So we're going to do that, and we're going to assign it to 2, and I'll get rid of this here. So now we have a program that does absolutely nothing. So I am going to change the string here, and I'm going to input your name. So again, these are simple stuff, but it's just a review for you. And notice all the nasty things that you're getting down here. So let's see what the warning is. We know what the error is. Let's see what's in here. Oh, truncation from double to float. So that's what I'm talking about, but that's no big deal to worry about. So that's just a warning, and it won't affect anything. If you are worried about that message, then just feel free to use the word double, use the data type. So let's just make something really, really, really simple. Let's just enter your first name and your last name. So I'm going to type a word called cout. Now notice that I put it in capital letters, and it gives me this red squiggly line because there's no such thing as cout. It says it's undefined. What do you mean? We used it last week. Well, the problem is it's in capital letters, so we must make it lowercase letters. C++ is case sensitive. A little a is not the same as a big A. And here is notice that it's standard cout, and we don't have to type the std : because we're using namespace standard up here. So that saves us the hassle of typing that in, which would obviously be a major pain. So I'm going to put in, what is your first name? Now notice I'm leaving everything on the same line. So I'm going to type in cout. I'm sorry, cin. And then I'm going to type in Now, the reason why I have these red lines here, even though I'm going to type in something, is because it doesn't recognize what I'm doing just yet. And I'm going to type in first name. Now, notice I'm not getting anything that says first name. And I'm putting a colon in here, a semicolon. Everything has to end in a semicolon. So I'm going, what is this red squiggly line? Did I spell something wrong like Microsoft Word? It says, oh, first name is not defined. Let's go and define it. So notice that I have a float and I declared variables on separate line, but I didn't do float diameter equals 0, float radius equals 0. I did it in here, and each one I separated with a comma. If I were to put a semicolon here, it's going to not recognize this. But when you put a comma, it knows that it's all part of the same declaration. That is okay. You can do float diameter equals 0, float radius equals 0 if you prefer, or type in. Now, leave this on the same line, or rather on a separate line. The reason being is notice how they line up nice when you do it that way. So I'm going to do the same thing with string. So I'm going to put this on another line. And then I'm going to change this to a comma. And I will do first name. And I'm typing equals, quote, quote. Notice no space there. Then last name. Of course, you have to spell it right. Now that I'm done, I have the semicolon. So, welcome, Gwendolyn. Welcome, Jure. Good to see you. Shirt and tie. You look really nice. Awesome. Welcome. All right. So now we have things declared. And again, it's okay to declare them like this. That's the way I do it. Notice that every one of these is initialized to nothing in here. So that's fine. So we're going to now put in, we have C out. What is your first name? Now notice I have a space after the E and then the quote. So I'm going to do it when I actually get it, you will see the reasoning behind it. So let's do what is your last name and C in last name. Now notice I'm just typing in LAS and I can go right down here, hit the tab key, it fills it in. So there's a little initializing that you need to follow, so just make sure. Also, I would recommend putting question marks here. So you definitely want to put a space between them. And I'm making sure now quarter is okay, so it is recording. I'm just not seeing that thing. Okay, so that's good. So we'll go back to do that. I'm going to click on pause just to make sure. And
you ever try using Bandicam, Professor?
No, I like this better. This works very well. Normally this doesn't disappear, and for some reason it did. I'm just not 100% sure why it did, and it normally has another icon here.
Is that free?
You can get a free version of it. It's not full featured like this is. It doesn't have the editor, but this comes linked with Canvas, but I use the standalone version because it's easier to manipulate in here. So, but I believe it is, you can get a free version of it. All right, so we're going to go back here and let's do something here and let's print out it. Now, right now, it's not going to do anything. So I'm just going to put out, C out, hello for right now. Or we'll do the world famous hello world. And notice we have a system pause at the end and we have a return. Now after hello world, I'm going to put a /n. Now notice the difference between the slashes here and this slash here. So this is going to be what's called an escape character. It's going to allow you to do a new line Otherwise, we would have to type in endl, which we'll go over very shortly. So I'm going to run this program. A shortcut to run it is Control F5. That will compile it. If we have no errors, then it's going to ask what's your first name and last name. So it's just hello world. So that takes care of that. Well, that's not very useful. So let's do something, and we're going to type in cout, and we're going to do it 2 different ways. Let's type in hello, and then I'm going to type in first name. Then I'm going to type in a space and last name. And there is an easier way to do this, which we'll do. Now, I'm not going to hit endl. I'm not going to put in this backspace over here so you can see what will happen. Now, bear in mind, again, can't say this enough, we're working on Visual Studio 2019. Some of the compilers will put in a press any key to continue at the end. Some of them will not. That's why I always start this with a system pause to the next line and a return 0 in here. If you do not have a return, you could get an error in here because of the function being an integer, which when we get into functions where that return values, you'll understand what I'm talking about. For now, we just need to worry that this is a main function. All C++ programs must begin with a main function. So that takes care of this. And we have some extra spaces in here, which we'll get rid of when we finish it up. So now let's see what happens. Again, Control F5. And I'm going to type in my first name. And now notice I hit a space. So let's try it again. And I'm going to type in my last name. And it's saying, what is your first name? And I'm typing in my first name space last name. Make sure you fully understand this, and I will explain it in 1 second. Now, it never asked me what my last name is. And then it printed hello world, but it said hello Richard Foster. Now here is, everything is jammed under one line in here. So that's why you want to put in the end L, or you can always put something in here before it just to make sure. You could always do a cout. End L means print out a new line character. So let's do the exact same thing.
Professor, I have a question on that.
Go ahead. What's the question?
In mine, I gave the pause a value of 1 or 0 so that it didn't push out, press any key to enter, but you can still enter a key.
Well, you can actually have a custom message using null in there, which is 0. Right. And that's a good point. But yeah, that's if you want to experiment and jump on, do things in here. But
I'm just asking if that's okay for the assignment, because
yeah, I mean, I'm okay with that, because okay. that was something I'm going to address in the future, to have a custom message that says whatever you want it to say in here.
Okay,
if you
make sure that
yeah, no, that's fine. That's absolutely fine in here. So yeah, you just do a special way in there, and I will address that next week if you guys remind me how to do a custom system pause in here. So there's a lot of things that you can do. I will also show you how to make the bell ring, your computer bell, which is really very easy. All right, so now let's do the same thing again. And I'll type in, and remind me that I'm going to tell you what this does. So now we had an extra space over here because we put the CL. So we didn't have to worry about it here. Now, notice that I typed in Richard space Foster. The space says, okay, that's the end of the string. We're using cin. The way cin works is as soon as it gets something that is not part of the variable, a string, a variable, as soon as you put a space, if you have an integer or float, as soon as you put in a space or something other than an integer or a float, it will say, okay, you're done. So what it does is, I typed in Richard, it hit a space. So what it did said, okay, he's done. And then when I hit the enter key, the Foster went into the keyboard buffer. That means that it's still there. It's just not accessible right now. So now when I hit the cin last name, it goes, oh, we already have information in there. So it pulls out my last name in here. So a very common mistake is something like this, and then all of a sudden people don't realize why. Now in this particular case, it's no big deal, but suppose I had a middle initial. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's go back in and put in initial. So I'm going to put in a character, and I'm just going to type initial. You know what? Let's make it middle initial, just so you can see the camel case. So notice we have lower, middle, and then capital I, and then initial. Now this is a little bit differently. If you're going to ask me why, the answer is going to be a big fat I don't know. So we're using a single quote. This is the part that you have to remember. Then you have to put a space. With a string, there's no space. With a character, there is a space. So let's go in here and put in cout. What is your middle initial? Doesn't get any more exciting than that. So I'll do cin, and I will do middle initial. Now you don't have to worry about a cout end line, because when you hit the enter key after cin, it will automatically go to the next line. So I will now put in, let's put in cin here. Let's put in a middle initial. And we're good to go here. So let's see what happens now. Let's do it differently. So let's do it straight the first time. And I'm going to type in Richard. And there are ways to make the first character uppercase. And I'll put in A. And then I'll put in, and let's see what happens. Okay, well that worked out pretty good. So now let's try not typing it in properly. Let's just type in Richard Foster. Okay, what is your middle initial? What is your last name? Wow. So notice it put in the middle initial here. Now, but I don't understand. I put in all this over here. Well, the problem is we're looking for a character. A character is one character. So as soon as you typed in that one character, it said, okay, he's done. And then he puts the rest in there. So you'll get used to that. So the bottom line is be very careful when you're inputting data for now. When we get to strings, we'll be using a function called getLine that allows you to get a whole line of information, strings. We'll also be using something similar to that to get integers, and we'll convert it. Well, it'll actually be a string which will convert to an integer, and that allows you to check to make sure that if you get a bad input, that allows you to fix that, but we don't need to worry about that for right now. So let's change something here, and let's type in a plus instead. Now, basically, it should be the same. And then I'm going to do something with integers. So let's put in plus. We're going to replace this. To me, a plus sign is a lot easier to do than the two less than signs. Either way is correct, and either way is acceptable. So let's go and compile it again and see what happens. So we do Richard, A, and then Foster. And everything looks pretty good. So let me add a number to it. So let's just put max numbers in the middle of this for a reason. And let's put in here, we'll put in max numbers. Now notice it's not finding it. Well, why is it not finding it? Because there's nothing in there with a lowercase max. And here it's not finding it because we have it bumped up to the other word. So if you're looking to find out why things don't work, see if you have it. So let's try it now. Okay, so now it's working. So we'll go back over that in a second. Okay, if your code hint does not work, then just check to see if you have something bumped. Okay, now we have a plus sign. Okay, so how can we add a number to a string? That's the problem. It's not going to work. So let's try this. Let's change this to a in here. So that'll work. So the rule of thumb is use either all of these characters or all of the pluses. Now you have to use, you don't have to use it here, but you have to use it here. So we can put a plus here and everything should work. You have to put it here. As long as you have all strings, then you can put in plus signs. As soon as you go to a number, here. Now let's see what's going to happen when we add a number to this to see if it's even going to show. So these are things that I want to show you in the beginning. So if things don't work, then you have a concept of what's going on. All right, so we have this here. And let's put in Richard, A, and Foster. Let's see what happens. Okay, well, where's my middle initial? It's gone. Where is the max numbers? Not there. And so what we need to do is change everything here. When you're mixing these together, it's not going to work. So let's go and do this and see if that solves our problem. And that's the rule of thumb for... Okay, so let's try it again one more time and see what happens. Then we'll move on. And that works. Now notice I got the 2 here. Why did I get the 2? Because we're printing out max numbers, and that's a 2. All right, so I am going to